Hello and welcome to Gerety Talks. My name is Lucia Ongay and I am the co-founder of the Gerety Awards. Just like the awards, this series will put in the spotlight some of the industry's true change makers within the aim to drive progress in the industry at a global scale. Today we have three amazing guests from South Africa that were part of the executive jury last year. Segola, Chief Creative Officer at Draftline, her love for ideas and innovative strategic thinking spans almost 2 decades and the continent. A copywriter at heart and mind with a passion for brand development, she has worked in agencies in Johannesburg, Cape Town, and Lagos for brands like BMW, Five Roses, Nigerian Eagle, and Oando. She spends whatever free time she has studying towards a degree in law and developing a children's book series. Nadia Mohamed, Marketing Director, Mondelez International Africa, where she leads the marketing portfolio of some of the world's most iconic and loved brands. Prior to joining Mondelez, Nadia held the role of Commercial and Marketing Director for McCain Food Retail and Food Service Africa. Her experience spans across industries and global geographies for brands like Vodafone, Avi, and Time Digital at Commonwealth Bank of Australia. She represents Africa as global shaper at the World Economic Forum, and she's on the board of Women's Network for the UN Refugee Agency. And Sanché van Rensburg, Executive Creative Director at Avatar. She is no stranger to leading large and growing creative marketing organizations for top global clients like Unilever, L'Oreal, Coca-Cola, P&G, and others. Her career began 21 years ago, where after studying at the National School of the Arts and the AAA School of Advertising, she was offered a job at the Reflex Group in Paris, which then ignited her desire and passion for the creative world of ideas that can change people's behaviors, that change perceptions, and ultimately change the world. So, welcome to the three of us, and thanks for joining for this Gerety talk about South African creativity. So, we're going to start with the first question. I read in an article about South African creativity that a collaborative and entrepreneurial agency culture and lots of humor were some of the traits that identified it. Do you think there are certain characteristics that make South African advertising different to others? Is there something specific and immediately recognizable in campaigns from South Africa? Who would like to start?
Sure, do you want to kick off with me? I can certainly
Yes.
go for that. So I think South African advertising looks to reflect on real South African life in humorous and interesting ways, and that kind of makes us somewhat unique. We have a tendency to either laugh at ourselves or we've got a tendency to make lightheartedness of our realities. And I think at some points we reflect quite deeply and emotionally and connect with our sense of Ubuntu. And I think that balance, it's the notion and philosophy behind the I am because you are. And I'm sure, Sanché and Neo can add light to how creatively we bring that about in a way that's very compassionate and defined through our own realities and through our own South Africanness and our African continentness. I think it's unique in how we explore that.
No, absolutely. I could jump in there as well to say I think our history as South Africans has really defined, our context today, right? It's really just, I think, realigned ourselves with, who we truly want to be as a collective. And ultimately that really does influence, as Nadia mentioned, the way we laugh at ourselves. I think in order for a nation to get through such trauma, that you have to start to embrace other forms of coping, right? And I think humor is really something that's very key or evident really in I think South Africa, and our diversity also is really also like a work in progress where we're always learning, trying to kind of create the future or the country we're trying to be. And I think that is really reflective in the work that we do. When you look at work across the international stages, you can always pick out work from South Africa because it just has a certain nuance, and you can tell that it is. It really comes from a very, very interesting and very different kind of perspective. And I think that's where our work really just stands out from the rest of the world because of that unique perspective that we have.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with Nadia and Neo. I think what we do as South Africans, we really play in culture, because our culture is really interesting. We've got a big diversity. I mean, our history is very interesting. And I think as creatives, I mean, we're still evolving. We're still sometimes trying to find our identity. I mean, there has been quite a few discussions on what is our identity as South African creatives. But I think we've progressed, and we are doing amazing work. And from my experience working abroad and coming back, South Africans, how would I put it? South Africans like to hustle. So where in the States, for example, you're in a box and you have to do that. As South African creatives, not even just creatives, the strategists, I mean, everyone within the agency, we all come together. We're all passionate about what we do. And I think that comes out in our work. I mean, we all want to come up with great ideas that, offer these solutions for our clients. But again, like I said, playing in culture is very important to us.
And do you think that you spoke about humor? Is it a humor that mainly South Africans understand, or is it something that is universally understood, do you think?
There's a fine line. I mean, we have a humor that I think only South Africans would understand. Hey, ladies, I'm sure you agree with that.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, yeah, I think there are aspects of it, but ultimately, I mean, the work that we do, we always try to tap into human nature, right, and to real human insights that really resonate with anyone. So, it's always critical to really talk to people as people, within our marketing campaigns. But ultimately, yes, I mean, to Sanché's point, I mean, there are things that if you're sitting in a room full of people, two South Africans will have their specific brand of humor, a specific little lingo, and you don't even have to say much, and you just get it. Yeah, right. So absolutely, I mean, I think it is quite different, but ultimately, I think like people, we are humans at heart, but of course, we'll have a certain kind of like little nuanced brand of how we do things. Absolutely.
There's a uniqueness in our humor that only we understand and we define, actually. That's quite different to the rest of the world, I think.
Yes.
And very often it's only shared by true South Africans across the diverse spectrum, which it's well understood as truly and uniquely South African.
And our language, I mean, we've got so many languages here that there's certain things you cannot translate into English, for example. So there's that whole realm of things and how our language is used and the humor within that. So that is quite hard to translate.
And just how like our language also evolves. I mean, you talked about culture actually, where you talked about, we are about culture, we drive culture, we live in culture. And what's interesting being in our line of work is that, you're constantly tapping into this rapidly evolving, culture. What was, I mean, when you just look at Twitter, like South African Twitter, what's happening and trending and just on everyone's lips today, obviously will move because that's the nature of Twitter to something else tomorrow. But it's such a big cultural it has such a big cultural impact that it really makes working in our world very interesting, because you do get to tap into real meaty sort of cultural nuances that in order to ultimately speak to your audiences. So it's a great space to be in. I think being a creative in South Africa is certainly very interesting. And it's certainly something I want to be in for a long time, because I mean, it's just every day feels like it's a different day, honestly.
So while we're still on that, I mean, it does relate to another question I think you're going to bring up, but like South African work at the moment. So a brand that had played on the humor and politics for quite a while was Nandos. So Nandos is a very good example. And for me, one of the favorite things was The Dictator was actually banned. That's South African humor, but using politics. I don't know if you have seen it. I can send it to you. It's really funny. And then something that's local now, which is, it's also again tongue in cheek, is what Metropolitan are doing with Escort Bacon and a South African comedian. It's also really funny, but again, it is only South African humor that that you'll get.
Yeah.
And I think, the question that you'll come to in Nandos is so prominent is that, like, Nandos often steps into a realm that makes people quite excited. And I think in the last couple of months, there's been a need to do that. The pandemic has certainly brought about a level of anxiety and a level of just sort of worry and angst. And I think Nando's steer and the take on the current realities of that pandemic, and drawing from this rich canvas that Nadia and Sanché are referring to being the South African canvas, they've taken on these uniquely South African stories like The Dictator, and it's banned, but it was so uniquely South African and so relevant at the time that, consumers can reflect and go, that's life for us, such is life. And I think the response to COVID, globally has certainly not been unique in any way. I think we can sit amongst the best of countries and the worst of countries, and we've probably had similar responses across COVID. But there is a unique experience in every continent, and I think ours is such that we have to find the silver lining regardless. The recent notation around vaccines being, our president chipping you to keep track of you over the next couple of years has been a light-hearted way of Nando's addressing the fact that the belief in vaccines are somewhat wiltering. And I think, again, it's that silver lining and it's that lighter tone that we can bring as South Africans, and we can accept and we can chuckle. And it makes our advertising and makes some of these campaigns just so heartwarming, but so truthful at the same time. So I chuckle at it.
There was, I don't know if I can show this on this video, but this was, we're talking about Twitter, but this was a Nando's post, which I thought was quite funny. We're talking about Nando's.
Yeah.
I
saw that.
It's a post, but it's so on brand. It's so, that's a beautiful thing about Nando's, I think, as a uniquely South African brand, is that they've maintained this perspective, since inception, and they've never relented. And this is the kind of bravery or the kind of brave work and brave clients, particularly enjoy working with, because you're constantly pushing the boundaries. And really, you actually are talking to real people. I think that's the most important thing for me is, brands have to understand that they, people are not just consumers, they are actually people. And these brands are integrating into these people's lives. So there has to be, some way where you start to see your consumer as a human, and Nando's, I think, captures it very well, and then they always just push the right button, and that's what they do well. I mean, even Dictator was banned. I mean, it was pulled off TV very quickly, but everyone remembers it. And then, so I guess that was futile on the banning boards, unfortunately, ASA's part. But yeah, I mean, it's a perfect example of just great South African work consistently.
And talking about consistent work, do you have an all-time favorite South African campaign?
So I do. I mean, the campaign that always, every time I just think, oh wow, I just wish I'd done that myself. Is a campaign that was done by TVWA, I think circa 2000 and possibly 3 or 4, maybe 5, for SABC1. It was called Take Another Look at Mzansi. And that campaign, right? I mean, amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, brilliant. I mean, we'll send it to you, Lucia, as well, just to, to have a look at kind of what we're talking about. I mean, that campaign was, one, ahead of its time, but two, again, it was addressing, a space where I think we were trying to kind of navigate ourselves as a nation, right? And as a, as a people, who are we? Because we've been so separated for so long. It was legislated that we're separate types of people or entities within the greater South African context, and ultimately post-democracy, we're kind of trying to find our feet and I think somebody between Sanché and Nadia mentioned that we're trying to find like our identity, right? Our collective identity as a country. And that ad is my absolute favorite because it really just captured a true South African way of being, but just switched it so that we could see each other from a different perspective.
Oh, it's amazing.
The positioning for that campaign was Take Another Look at Mzansi. And that ad on its own really just achieved that. I mean, it so simply allowed us to, each individual in South Africa to just relook how we see ourselves in relation to other people as well. So it was just a stroke of genius. I mean, that ad could play today, and I'd still
yeah.
love it.
Oh,
I don't
dear.
yeah.
And it was somewhat of there was a bit of a mirror reflection in that in the journey, right? We were reflecting on each other, but we were most importantly reflecting on our opinion of what we believed was transformation. Right? Yeah, it was like there was a bit of a higher order purpose there as well. And I think, one that strikes me often when I'm asked this question is, and I don't know if you remember it, but the bells, give that man a bells ad.
Yes.
That the Reader, it was called, if I'm not mistaken. I think it was also it was very long ago. It was 2003, and I remember almost looking at it through a whole different lens with regards to purpose. And I think, there was reflection in occasion, it was reflection in how a brand brought to life people gathering, especially in the alcohol industry, which was so untoward to have something so powerful be about literacy and literacy of tomorrow and literacy of our past and the impact thereof. Similar to take a look at Mzansi, there was a notion around how do we better the situation we're in, and how do we focus on building a new tomorrow, even if we are, going into our 50s or 60s, having, a gent of that age learn to read, just to read his son's book. I think it was quite extraordinary, and it was broad, and it speaks to that touching notion of, and we said this about South Africans, but this perseverance that really stays true to the values and the spirit behind our brands and behind us as South Africans. And leveraging again, I mean, I could see that today, and I could think it's so relevant right now because the insight is so true. It's so unique, but it's so higher order that it really makes you think beyond just, literacy. It makes you think about our history. It makes you think about what our country's been through, or what our continent has been through, and the requirement for each and every one of us to play a role and differentiate how we move forward. So, yeah, I would just add, there's quite a few of them, but that one stands out for me.
Yeah.
There is a lot. I mean, that was quite a difficult question. I mean, obviously Dictator's on my list of Nandos, for sure. There's so many. There's one that was, I mean, it's just a classic ad, but it was for Telkom. Remember the one it's like in Natal, and the old man is shouting.
Yes, the network ad.
Oh my gosh, that was amazing. I mean, that's really old.
Yes.
But you know what? One that I am proud of, not that I did, but something that I'm proud of for fellow South African creatives was the Adidas original. So originals never finished. So that ad cleaned out at awards. It was 2007, but the team that came up with that was actually South Africans. So it was Jonas Leonardo in New York, but the team that worked on it was South Africans. The director was South African. The stylist was South African, and was mainly shot here. So I was really proud. You could see in that commercial, I mean, it gave you goosebumps the first time you saw it, but there was that South Africanness that was in there. And then after, it started a trend, like, for example, Beyonce and her thing, taking on that whole South African, there's that thing, I can't explain it, but there's like a unique identity or something. So that commercial, for me, and I'll never forget it from a visual point of view. I mean, it's maybe not a heavy conceptual, emotional one, but visually, I thought that was really amazing. But there are so many. It's really hard to list.
Yeah, but I think the thing that comes out for me, the common thread that comes out here is that, when a brand understands its purpose, it goes beyond just, selling a product. It starts to do meaningful work that really resonates, right? Like, I think that's the most important thing for me is, talking to people. I'll probably say it like 100 times in this session, Lucia, so please forgive us. But like it's because, and that's why it resonates, because it really is built on a real deep insight that is, that you can't fault, and ultimately then speaks honestly and directly to the people that it lives with. I mean, brands live with us ultimately, and that's how they need to operate in our lives. Yeah.
And the three of you were last year part of the executive jury for South Africa. Unfortunately, because of the pandemic, it had to be online. But can you tell me a little bit about the experience?
Yeah, I'll kick off. I think the experience was certainly an honor. I think before we connected, I said to you, it's certainly a different steer on awards, and it's a courageous steer. The foundation of the Gerety Awards and the intent behind it is certainly very clear. And it was lovely, firstly, to network with so many courageous and exceptional women in the industry. But more importantly, I think it's fresh. I think that the approach is synchronized. And I think the emphasis around the prowess of a female lens within advertising, and taking that brave stance to encourage the balance and almost force the balance and the shift that's required in the industry is what I refer to as brave and courageous, in every discussion that I've had around the Gerety Awards. And I think, I've gained immense experience, so thank you. It was certainly a privilege. And I think there's been, if anything, the work that was showcased was inspirational. There was a lot of inspirational work that I know I've leveraged from in just insights and understanding, etc. And then more importantly, the networking to be able to reach out to a fellow female leader, and knowing that there's so many of us charging the fore and changing what we believe is the status quo it really was a privilege. So thank you for that, by the way.
So I'm going to chip in there. So I was not able to judge, Lucia. I was actually quite devastated for that. And the fact that I made many other judging panels, except with the Gereties, I was booked on a conference for 2 days that I could not get out of. So, but I have to echo Nadia's points on the privilege. First of all, when I was invited by Joe, I think it was, I read up on the Gerety Awards. I'd never heard of them. And I was completely blown away by the fact that you were, trying to force this change. I think it's such an amazing, amazing platform. And I think ultimately, and I'd love to see it grow, because we are a minority in this industry. Globally, we're a minority. And by trying to bring our perspective, the female perspective, to the forefront, I think is something to be commended. My English left me for a moment there. But it was a huge privilege to be invited. I was hugely excited. So I would love for you to invite me again for this year. And I'll be sure to make it.
Can we go to Paris?
Well, yeah, whenever we can travel again, of course. We are very much looking forward to meeting our juries in person sometime. But it doesn't look like it's gonna happen like soon.
No.
Yeah, provided it's not winter, I'm on that bus with you, Sanché.
I'll be there. I'll bring my warm boots. I'll bring a pair for you too, Lucia. But I'll be there. Yeah, but but I really must commend this initiative. I think it's just fantastic. It feels like our voices are heard. I think in our day to day, it's very easy for women to feel unheard, almost sidelined, mansplained, as the youth call it. But to have a forum like this where you are free to speak, where you are free to have an opinion, and I think an unfettered opinion, amongst peers who look like you. I think there's something to be said about that. And I think, I think all of us are, kind of leaders in our industries, and perhaps we haven't encountered those challenges, in our day to day, kind of speaking up in a boardroom is not an immediate fear anymore, right? But there's something to be said about just having that platform, because it allows you to then remember also where we've come from, and remember how we've had to entrench our voices and really be heard in this with this minority perspective, or minority kind of place that we play in this place. So I loved it, guys. Lucia, so kudos to you, kudos to Joe. I think it's fantastic. Let it grow further. Let it grow more. Let it be bigger than can.
Yes, why not?
Yeah. That's a great ambition. Lucia, I'm so sorry to do this, but I have to bounce out. I have to join another session. Apologies, it was only booked for half an hour and I've got to bounce into an MLT session. My apologies, but thank you so much for this. It's been absolutely fantastic.
For joining us. And don't worry, we'll just carry on with Sanché and Neil.
Yeah, perfect.
Thank you.
Cheers. Bye, Sanché. Bye, Neo. Take care.
Nadia.
Bye.
Neo, FCB Joburg won a silver last year at Gerety with the phonetic can campaign. Can you tell us about how this campaign was conceived?
So, so unfortunately, I didn't do that campaign. That's also another one where, Coca-Cola is always an amazing brand to work on, and that was done by my dear colleague and friend Suhana Gordon, who's just an amazing thinker. And so she is. I mean, she's amazing. She was a leader on that campaign, and I believe that campaign came from the platform, the Name the Can platform that Coke had been, had established. I think in Australia. I think it started in Australia. Hey, Sanché, several years ago. And I mean, what's beautiful is that while that campaign started in Australia, eventually, as it was adopted across the different markets for Coca-Cola, South Africa actually showed up, or showed up and showed off with our interpretation of that platform. The Bobby ad was created at FCB. Another ad that just killed everywhere. It did extremely well, and that ad then subsequently became adopted across the different markets. So South Africa really played a big role. So the phonetic can campaign was just a brilliant evolution from that amazing platform. And when you have an amazing platform is when you can year on year build on it and create new engagements, right? And still intrigue and still do bloody amazing work from it. So I think kudos to FCB and Suhana on that. It was brilliant, and the award was well deserved. I can say. I wish I'd worked on that myself.
Yeah, it was great.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And Sanché, you participated in the Made for You project with Lampos Luminaries, a fellowship for emerging women photographers and videographers. Can you tell us about this project and about Lampos Luminaries?
So yes, it was so exciting, this Lamppost project. So Lamppost is actually a well-known production company in Johannesburg, or South Africa. So they have a bank of photographers, stylists, and a few creatives. And they felt that there was a lack of females in our industry. So they created this 10-month fellowship program for emerging young photographers, creatives, videographers. So it started in November 2019 when they did a call for entries, and then they obviously narrowed it down to the top 4 girls. So they asked a few people in the industry, such as myself, to come in and mentor the girls. So there were 10 projects over 10 months, and we were all given something to focus on. And mine was obviously focusing on advertising. And I came up with a fictitious brief to celebrate women and larger women. And it was really amazing that these young girls that didn't have traditional training. So listening to their ideas and what they wanted to do, and it was a really, really great experience. But it was also quite challenging at the time because COVID hit. So we now had to produce all of this stuff during COVID. So it was all remote working, connecting via Zoom on the shoot. So we did learn a lot about ourselves. We learned a lot of patience. But these 4 girls have just blossomed into incredible talent. And since then, I've actually used 2 of them on actual paying client jobs, for example, Nokia. So this program will continue again. And yeah, it's amazing. I mean, we need to do a lot more of these things. I mean, just example of what you guys do. I mean, the female awards, there's so many young women out there that just need a helping hand, or, some upliftment or mentorship. And I'm very pro that. And I love to be part of these sort of programs. Maybe Nadia, you can do the next one coming up.
Oh, absolutely.
I'll put you forward.
Yeah, please. All for it, hey, Sanché. I mean, that's a passion point of mine. Being a girl in the industry, there's not very many of us. I mean, I think, there's not that many of us. So absolutely keen to participate. I think it's fabulous. And is it still going to be photographers? I'm
not too sure, but I mean, obviously, because Lamppost is photographers and videographers, but they've now branched out into illustrators and they're stylists. So I think they might branch out a bit more. I'll send you all the information, guys. But what was amazing about this program is that sponsors came involved. And for example, Nikon got involved and sponsored all these girls a camera. I mean, these cameras are like
Oh,
60,000
Wow.
rand each. So they were all got given cameras, and they're all ready, you know, they're all professional now. So they're actually shooting stuff. But I'll send you the links. It's very
oh,
inspiring and
great.
beautiful.
That actually gives me
Uh,
goosebumps. That's fabulous. And you can actually, and you actually went on to use them for
yes,
I mean,
yes.
that's
Oh no, it
great.
was so great.
Yeah.
So what I love about your awards is that, yes, we're celebrating women because like Nadia and I, we've been around for a long time, and we know that this industry has been a boys' club,
Yeah.
and it's slowly changing, like with you in your position and me in my position. I mean, senior creative females, it's slowly growing, but we do need a lot more work in that. I think we need to do a lot more with colleges. I think we need to do a lot more programs because there aren't enough females in our industry. But things like your awards, it's one step in the right direction, and we happy to support you.
Yeah, we champion that 100%.
Mm.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, we are very happy that you were part of our jury, of course. And a last question. So you were talking, Sanché, about the pandemic and all the challenges that we had. So what do you expect to find in campaigns for 2021? What kind of stories or ideas would you like to see or brands to tell us this year?
Okay, so I actually wrote something down. Because if I can just carry on and talk and talk and talk. It's a year where we have to continue to challenge things even more, challenge ourselves, challenge our clients, but we also have to adapt. I mean, we have adapted in 2020, but you know, this thing is not going away. It has held us back quite a lot of things that we want to do, but we have learned a lot of valuable lessons, such as working together, appreciating time, especially that. It's amazing how we've appreciated time, especially time with our families. Like we've forgot about all that stuff. We're so immersed into our jobs that that becomes your only thing at some point. So 2020, we spend a lot of time with our families and our loved ones and our friends. We've all become more versatile in the way we work, which is incredible. I mean, we have been more productive working at home than we are in an office. And it's amazing how all these, I mean, agencies have now changed. Like instead of, you know, coming into an office, we have a remote office that you can go to. So there's a lot of that's changed, but there's a lot of questions that we need to look at. Okay, so for me, the biggest question is, so the challenge is how is advertising going to remain strong after this pandemic? Because people have realized that we don't need all that stuff that we had before. I mean, especially me. We consume and we get so engrossed in consuming, but the pandemic has taught us that we can live with so much less. So how are brands going to be relevant and play an important role in people's lives now? What makes me want to have you as a brand, you know, or buy you as a product? So we need to be really smart about going forward. Or what are we going to do that's different, and challenge ourselves and our clients and what they want.
Absolutely. And I think
I rambled on there.
no, but I mean, I think you touched on a lot of points that I was going to touch on as well. I think it's, I think one thing for me, it's taught me that life is fragile, right? And the things that we held with such high regard, I mean, as you said, Sanché, you realize that you actually don't need, so it's more kind of coming back to the self, I would say, coming back to what's really important, right? Family, the things that you hold dear in your life. Look, and I think it's shown our resilience as, I think, humanity. I mean, this is globally. I mean, this is, the one challenge that we as a global community have experienced in equal measure with equal devastation. And I think it's really going to change how, we move forward in a lot of things in our lives, right? And just rethink what's important. I think that's the fundamental thing. But ultimately, I think this is a great opportunity for our industry to evolve. I think since David Ogilvy, he's been, we've been rocking on the same path, kind of doing our thing. And now we're really forced to evolve. We're forced to innovate and rethink how we do things. And I think this is probably a new dawn for our industry. I mean, budgets are getting cut quite considerably. So how do we survive that? And so a lot of things has to go into that very question that you asked, Sanché, how are we going to survive it, right? So I think it's really, really critical, and for all of us as an industry to really gaze very deeply into the eyes of that potential of what we
Yeah.
can be. Yeah, and then ultimately, I think the work. I think the work last year. You know, I mean, I saw some beautiful pieces that were done under the context of COVID, and a lot of work
Yes.
maybe was a little bit reactive. Hey, like it was a
Okay.
little bit okay, COVID, in a, you know, in these unprecedented times. I mean, the cliche line of an like an advert during COVID. It'll be interesting to see how now that we've what's the word? We've almost evolved somewhat. We had to change our mindsets very quickly and adapt to this new way of being. How are we going to then segue out of that? Yeah, like as far as our work is concerned, right? So it'll be interesting to see what gets entered into the Gerety Awards later on, what gets entered, even beyond 2021 into 2022, how our work evolves, just the narrative in our work, and how clients also change their strategies as well. So I think it's a great time. It's an unfortunate time, but it's certainly a great time. I think if we look at it with great opportunity, right, as a filter.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
Yeah.
Well
Yes.
said.
It does sound like a big challenge. So good luck to you.
All of
And
us.
yeah,
All of
let's
us.
chat a year from now and see what happened, right? I'm gonna
Yeah.
write down this down, everything that you said, and see from a year from now if this has happened or what has happened. In any case, thank you very much for joining us today in this Gerety talk about South African creativity, and let us know a little bit about your lives and your work. And also thanks for joining our Gerety jury last year. And let's hope for all the best. Good luck this year. Thank
Thank
you.
you so much, and good luck to
Thank
you.
you. And we'll
Thank you
keep in
so much.
touch.
Yes.
Yes, we will,
Thank you
definitely.
so much.
Cheers. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.